Hi everyone, it's Shari Carroll here with a special Hero Arts catalog debut card. I've created a layered elegant card using the Leafy Vine cling stamp. I've stamped my main image on acetate and then added in some die cuts and some great pattern papers. Okay, to start things off, one of the things that I usually do first when I'm going to stamp on acetate is I go ahead and re-ink my StazOn white opaque ink pad, and that's just, I squirt out the ink onto the pad and I use a card, and here I have just a little Starbucks card that I pick them up a lot of the times when I'm at Starbucks, and I just press the ink into the sponge, and once I'm done I just kind of wipe that card off and then go ahead and recap it. So now that I'm ready, I'm going to go ahead and ink up my stamp, and this is a prototype stamp, so it doesn't have the regular cling back on it right now. And so I'm just going to ink this up, and I've stuck my acetate to my stamp press with a little bit of adhesive so that I can go ahead and press my acetate onto the stamp. So even though it's clear, you can kind of see that through. So I'm just pressing my press onto the stamp. I'm going to go ahead and position this where I want it. And then once I have that positioned, I go ahead and walk my fingers around and just lightly press this in without shifting and sliding the acetate at all. So just pressing, and I'm kind of holding in one spot and walking my fingers around. This will give me a nice crisp image. And once I'm done with that and happy with that, I go over one more time, and then I'll lift this up, and my stamp will stick to this because it has nothing to cling to. So shaking it didn't work, so I just pressed my thumb under there, and now I have my stamped acetate. And I'll pull this off and show you how this looks. It's just really beautiful. Really nice detail. I've given my acetate a chance to dry, and I've also trimmed it down plus some pattern papers, and they'll sit all together on a top folding card like this. And I do want to stamp on this pattern paper here. I say pattern paper even though it's kind of a solid, but it comes from this pack, and it's by Simon Says Stamps, and it's made especially for them from Fancy Pants Designs. The background I've chosen to use with this is called the Loop Flower pattern, and this is also a brand new stamp for the 2013 catalog debut, and also wet cement mid-tone ink. This goes perfectly with these colors of paper. And so here I'm just adding the ink to the background, and if you notice I kind of give a little bit of twist when I do this. It gives me a really good coverage of ink. And so I'll just make sure I get the entire piece covered up, and once I do, I'll go ahead and cap off my ink, and I'll place my panel of paper on top, and I'm grabbing a piece of scrap paper right now so I can be ready. So I'm going to line up the pattern with the edge of the paper. And once I'm happy with that, I can go ahead and press this down. Oh, get my big head in there to make sure I'm lined up. And then I can put my scrap paper on top and go ahead and press around the stamp for a really perfect image. I've cut some strips of some of the other papers that I'll be putting onto my card, and also I've used My Favorite Things die, and that's a little flower die, which I still love. It's an older die. And also I've cut out some butterflies, and this is from a Sizzix die cut called Butterflies Number 4. Love these shape of butterflies as well. So everything coordinates together really nicely. Next, I'll be stamping my little greeting onto my white piece of paper, and I'm using a brand new ink, and it's called Charcoal, and it doesn't have the color label yet. And when I use a new stamp and a new ink, I like to give it a shot on some scrap paper first. And so next I'll be stamping this little guy onto my little skinny piece of paper, and here comes my head again. Actually, you can just see my hair to line it up, and I rock that a little bit, and now I have my greeting. I've already rolled up my flower, and I've used my paintbrush handle just to roll that up good and tight. And now I'll just be adding some glossy accents to that little tab, that little circle tab that's in the very bottom. So I'll just go ahead and spread some glossy accents on that. You don't need to use a lot, just enough to attach everything together. And now I'll be using the handle of my paintbrush to kind of press the center of that flower in there, and I'll press that in place and let it dry. I have all my pieces ready, and so now I can do some assembly. So I'll just go ahead and use my tape runner and run it onto the back of this stamped panel of paper. And I like to go around all the edges, and then I do a little bit in the center so it holds in place. And now I'll just line this up to some black cardstock and make sure that my margins are even. Next, I'll add a little bit of adhesive to one of my strips, and I'm just going to put this in a few spots, and this is where that stripe paper will sit on top. But for now, what I want to do is put this onto the back of the acetate and line this up. Once I have it lined up, I can go ahead and press that down in place. I'll also trim off the extra at the edge of the acetate. I'll be adding some foam dots to the back of that one piece. I like to lift everything up, plus it'll make the image on the acetate really pop. I'm adding a little bit of glossy accents to the center of the butterfly body, and now I'll just kind of press this in place. And this will stick to the acetate really well, so I won't have to worry about it shifting around or moving. So I'll just go ahead and press my finger in the center and let that dry. Once I have my butterfly in place, I'll go ahead and snip some of my foam dots, and I'm just going to snip off just to make this really tiny, and I'm using my Tim Holtz scissors, which are like Teflon, so that it doesn't stick. I'll go ahead and flip the entire panel over, and I'll put a foam dot just behind the butterfly so I can hide that, and the whole panel will lift up off the paper. So next I'll be adding some adhesive to my striped strip, and I'll be placing this over that adhesive that I put on that black piece. And once I have that lined up, I'll go ahead and press that in place, and now I can go ahead and trim off the excess. And I'm trimming just at the side of the acetate. I've added a few dots of glossy accents to my little strip since it's so tiny, and that's the best glue to hold everything in place. So I'll just go ahead and push that down, and now I can turn this over and trim the excess off. I've created a double bow with my twine, and this is like a hemp twine, and I just kind of wrap the twine back and forth a couple times like a figure eight, and then tie another piece in the center. And here I've added some glossy accents to the center, and I'm just pressing this down and fluffing my bow. I'm adding a little bit of adhesive here to press my flower in place. You could use a glue dot if you have one, and once you have that positioned, go ahead and press that down. And here's how this panel looks. It's really starting to look fantastic. And the next thing I want to do is to finish off with my other little butterfly, and just like the last one, I'll put a little bit of glossy accents just at the body part. You don't need a whole lot of glossy accents, and I got a little bit too much, so I wiped off the extra. Next, I'll be adding some black gemstones, and I happen to have gotten these as a thank you in one of my Simon Says Stamps packages. So what I want to do is I'll be placing the black gemstones under the acetate, and this will help it lift up without needing any other foam dots or adhesive. So I'll just be placing these in the center of that loop flower design, and just kind of strategically placing them around so that it helps that acetate lift up. To finish things off, I'll go ahead and take the backing off of the foam dots, and now I'm just going to use that right edge to line this up. And once I have this lined up, then I can go ahead and press it down. I want to make sure everything's lined up really well. There we go. And then I can take the adhesive off of the back of that butterfly. I've also created a top folding white card to put this on, and this is how it looks. I've added a few extra gemstones to the center of the butterfly to create the body. And here's another close-up look at the detail of the acetate. I think it's really lovely. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this Hero Arts 2013 catalog debut. Thanks for watching.